Hey everyone, I wanted to go over some new and exciting or potentially disheartening and sad news that we have regarding the potential lifespan of the Nintendo Switch. And that is the fact that a recent wave of articles has recently hit, basically suggesting that The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which is of course the direct sequel to Breath of the Wild, the basis of pretty much the success of the Nintendo Switch as it originally launched in March of 2017, apparently they're suggesting that this game will be the last major release for the Nintendo Switch, as the Nintendo company will be focusing their shift into whatever the next mainline console will be. Therefore, suggesting that pretty much all the upcoming major releases after Breath of the Wild sequel, Tears of the Kingdom, could basically be a next generation Nintendo console. Now, this video is not going to be focusing on rumors regarding what the Switch Pro is, what the Switch 2 is, what the Super Switch is. We're not focusing on that. That's not what this video is about. What we are here to focus on is the idea that essentially Breath of the Wild Tears of the Kingdom is the last major Nintendo game on the current Nintendo Switch. And that, I'm sure, is going to come to a little bit of a surprise to some people, excitement to some, since they have been suggesting for a few years now that they want a brand new Nintendo console. I think a lot of people have been saying that for quite a while, but also a little bit of a disappointment, since of course you want more games on the systems you currently own, especially since the Nintendo Switch, even as of this holiday period that we just recently passed, the holiday period of 2022, it had massive sales. So yes, plenty of more people are still buying Nintendo Switches, and those people are not necessarily all that invested in just hearing that the system that they just literally bought is probably about to go under, or get pushed to the side as Nintendo focuses on whatever the next generation is. So there's plenty of articles regarding this already. We're going to be focusing one on specifically from Gaming Bolt. Huge shout out to them. Link in the description below if you haven't necessarily read it, where they simply suggest that The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom could be Nintendo's final major release for the Switch, and this is of course headed as a rumor. They mentioned that journalists claim that the Japanese giant doesn't have many major releases planned for the Switch going forward, with the focus allegedly shifting to its successor, and of course we're talking about 2023 and onward. In the article, they mentioned that Nintendo doesn't have a lot of first big party releases planned for 2023 so far. Do remember that until they post a brand new Nintendo Direct in 2023, we probably shouldn't necessarily make such bold predictions, but it is what it is. With The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom coming out in a few months' time, there's still plenty of excitement with the user's Switch base. However, it seems like there might also be a last major game on the Nintendo release for a while, and the last major game it releases on the Switch, period. Recently, journalists Christopher Dring of Game Industry and Andy Robinson of VGC, some relatively well-known journalists for quite a while, reputable to some degree, but of course reputable nonetheless, took to Twitter and stated that based on what they've heard, Nintendo doesn't have any significant new releases planned for the Switch after Zelda for quite some time. Interestingly, Robinson suggests this might be due to focus shifting internally to the Switch's successor, which Nintendo potentially begins to speak about in the new hardware by 2024. Of course, Tears of the Kingdom isn't the only first-party game that Nintendo's got in the pipeline for the Nintendo Switch, with the likes of Pikmin 4, Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, easy for me to say, and also that's also currently in the works. But it is also worth noting that the Japanese giant doesn't have anything announced that would be quite in the same level as the new Zelda game. Reports have certainly suggested that the company is working on its next major hardware release. It has been stockpiling raw materials, hinting at imminent large-scale manufacturing plans, while references to new hardware were also spotted last year in Nvidia's related leaks. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, meanwhile, is due to release in May 12th, and a themed limited edition Switch OLED was also recently shown in leaked images, which of course I didn't necessarily make a video about that, but you should be able to see those images on the screen right now. So essentially what we have here is Christopher Ding, which they mentioned specifically is from Game Industry. He was asked, I believe, a question from a previous tweet that he was asked, wait, what do you mean the next games are in development for the next hardware? He mentions, no, I didn't literally mean nothing. I have heard that it's after Zelda, Nintendo doesn't have a significant game for quite some time. Now, that is a very vague statement. I don't think they're actually suggesting that this would be the last Nintendo Switch. At the very least, specifically in their tweet here, Christopher doesn't necessarily seem to be suggesting that it is the last major Nintendo Switch game, but it is the last major release that they know of right now. once again, I'll reiterate this because it is worth mentioning. Until Nintendo posts a Nintendo Direct, I believe we've done this like cycle like 4 to 5 different times. Every single beginning of the year, people are like, this is the last year of the Switch. Nintendo has nothing to release. And then they post a Direct, and then all of a sudden there's like 15 brand new releases dropping in this following year. I believe they did that for like 2019, 2020, or maybe 2020 wasn't the great one because there was the pandemic situation, but 2021 certainly was one of those. So like pretty much every single year, you go into the year, Nintendo has like no releases announced, and then they drop 4 to 5 games. So, probably not necessarily the biggest, thing. Now, also as a qualifier to say that, there's no other major releases like Zelda. Yeah, there hasn't been another major release to the level of Zelda probably in 5 years. If you want to consider the fact that probably Animal Crossing is the only, maybe Smash Brothers, Animal Crossing. I think Mario Kart dropped also after the first Breath of the Wild. So like there's been a handful of games that really can just rival Breath of the Wild in that regard. So if your threshold is a game that sells 30 million copies, it's hard to say that Nintendo has released a lot of games in that tier, but no one would actually argue that Nintendo hasn't been releasing a lot of amazing games throughout the entirety of the Nintendo Switch life cycle. So there is a lot of nuance here that you kind of need to kind of weave through so we can like stop pretending that Nintendo hasn't been releasing games in the same tier of Breath of the Wild. Now, when it comes to Andy Robinson's tweet, I believe he also works for VGC. This is an outlet here, I believe, in Europe. He specifically mentions this is a direct sequel or a response to a tweet from Nightflyer TV. I'm not necessarily sure where they are, but they're essentially reporting on the Digital Foundry post. This was a video that Digital Foundry made. I believe it's like a weekly recap or yearly recap or something like that. And they casually mentioned, I believe this got a lot of play a few weeks back, heading into the last weeks of the year, 2022, where they simply mentioned that they had heard that there was a Switch Pro, but then Nintendo canceled it, and then, they're going to focus on whatever the next mainline console is. But I think they were more like speculative. I don't think they had like direct proof. I think that's a very hard thing to do, is to have direct proof that yes, Nintendo had a Switch Pro. Although there have been plenty of fake leakers out there claiming that developers had developer kits out there already. But of course, none of that has actually showed up. We have more proof that there's a PlayStation 5 Pro kit out there than we actually have proof that there was a Nintendo Switch Pro developer kit out there. So, take that with a grain of salt. So Andy Robinson actually responds to this specific tweet and mentions that from what I'm hearing, I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo starts talking about new hardware by 2024. I'm not convinced another huge first-party game other than Zelda is left on the Switch. Usually Nintendo predictions caveat apply. So, of course, he basically means that Nintendo can do anything they want at the end of the day, and you can predict whatever it is that you want, but they're going to do whatever it is that they want. Now, the interesting thing here is that he mentions that they're going to talk about new hardware by 2024. Yeah, that's kind of like what a lot of people have been suggesting for quite a while. Sales have been good, but they have been dropping slightly the past 2 years, I believe, or this past year. They're going to drop slightly, presumably this year, of course, they're going to drop a little bit more, especially now since PlayStation 5s and Xbox Series X's are more readily available or becoming more readily available, assumingly that's the ongoing conversation regarding that. And the Switch, of course, just has the OLED, so they're not necessarily doing that. At the same time, yes, it's worth mentioning the Steam Deck since a lot of people are still buying that thing. But let's remember, Steam, I believe Valve just suggested that they sold, I believe, 1 million Steam Decks. So they're not necessarily really competing with Nintendo in that regard. I've seen some ridiculous tweets, people suggesting that like the Steam Deck is going to surpass the Switch. I'm not sure in what way and in what universe, but definitely not this one. So the Steam Deck is doing fine, but it's also not a real competitor to the Switch. And or any other console for that matter. They're doing their very own thing, and if anything, it's competing with all of those other Ion Neo type of systems that they're just kind of like trying to be a PC but in your hands. So there is that. One of the things that I will kind of push back upon in this entire narrative is the fact that just because, let's say this is all true, and this is the last major Nintendo Switch release in May of 2023, fair enough. Let's not forget that for the PlayStation 4. The Last of Us Part 2, which is a fantastic game, might I add, regardless of all the memes and discussion on the internet regarding the story, not really the point here. I do think it's a fantastic game after all. There is some merit to be said that that game was technically the last major Sony release on the PlayStation 4, and I believe a few months later the PlayStation 5 dropped. No one missed a beat. That was an amazing game. It was literally the showpiece, visual striking game for the PlayStation 4. On PlayStation 4 Pro, it looked fantastic. When I played it finally on PlayStation 5, it looked stunning. So, you know, it's one of those things where, like, I'm not necessarily sure, like, if people are gonna really say, well, we're gonna go a year of drought and there's not gonna be any games. That's not really the case. That's not really what's gonna happen. And it could also mean that, you know, the sequel to Breath of the Wild, you know, Tears of the Kingdom, could easily be the showpiece game of the Nintendo Switch. If you could actually imagine that, the fact that the first game looked so fantastic, especially right out of the gate. We've had some really great looking games. Sure, shaky performance on the Nintendo Switch, but still nonetheless. And to imagine that the last game that they released, the last major game that they could release, could potentially be easily the best looking game in the system with hopefully decently good performance. So probably not all doom and gloom if you're considering that this might be the last game for the Switch. But at the end of the day, we're just going to have to stay tuned probably for around E3, when Nintendo is surely to reveal a bunch of brand new games dropping on the Switch for the tail end of 2023. Maybe even another Pokemon for that matter. Who the hell knows? And then we can actually go ahead and have a real serious discussion regarding the brand new Nintendo Switch system, which I'm sure conversations throughout the entire year are just going to heat up. But that's about all the information that I have for you guys today. If you're brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up. And as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.